Hi and welcome to another What's Current podcast from Napit. And today I am joined by James Chillman from Fergus. Hiya James, thanks for joining us.
Hi Steve, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, now James, we've got to admit to a little bit where we first met, haven't we, I think, before we actually start, because it was a legendary event, you remember, at ELEX last year at Coventry.
It was, yeah.
And we found a game.
Yeah, we did find a game. I wasn't sure we were going to talk about the game, but we are.
We need to talk about the game. We need to talk about the game because it was a match in heaven, wasn't it? Because you were playing with your crew, and we were just observing, having a look, seeing what was going on. And the next thing you know, you actually taught us the game. To be fair, what was the game? Tell us more, James.
Well, so we've got an office based in central Manchester, and there's a great game called Shuffleboard, which is sort of around. And we thought we were pretty good at it, but I think I'm not sure. Maybe it was an off day, but we did succumb and unfortunately, get absolutely thrashed by you and the team. So it was good fun. Luckily, we've got a table next to our office in a bar, so we did a bit of practice in there. So next time, maybe not so lucky.
Yeah, you're like going to turn professional shuffleboarders or something like
that. We've got our own pucks and everything now.
Yeah, that was a good day at that show, actually. It was a lot of fun because there was a lot of people from the ELEX show, wasn't there, all come together at the venue, and it created a real buzz. But I do remember that day really well because, like, you taught us and, like you say, we went on to beat you afterwards. Mind you,
it didn't work in our favour.
Yeah, maybe something to do with a few drinks we'd had during after show drinks, but we won't go there. Anyway, James, like I say, thanks for joining us. And so tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role and Fergus in general. What sort of things have to where you've got now in the position in the company? What's your background?
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm the country manager for Fergus. We're job management software. Originally stem over from in New Zealand, and I typically look after our operations and every function within the UK. So everything from our sales, marketing, all the way through to looking after our customers. And ultimately making sure that our product is fit for the UK market. We've developed a great product over in Australia and New Zealand, bringing it over to the UK. How do we make sure that it really works over here and helps tradespeople in the UK to live a better life, really?
Yeah, and have you noticed then that has that transition sort of had to be adapted for the UK market, do you think, from a New Zealand market? Is it different working ways and patterns over here?
Yeah, it's a super interesting thing. We kind of came into it thinking there's a lot of similarities. If you look at it on paper, the markets are very similar. Obviously New Zealand's a lot smaller, but there are some really big differences, and there's a big difference in terms of technical adoption. So typically wholesalers in New Zealand are much more advanced. They've got really fancy sort of IT systems, whereas over here we're sort of still playing catch up. But then when you've got the reverse probably out on the tools, so very little mobile use out there, whereas over here, mobile's king. Everyone's using their phone for everything, whereas there's a real lag over there in terms of people using that.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like you say, you do wonder how those kind of applications translate into the UK market. But it sounds like the research has been done to launch it and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there's lots of fun things, like CIS and domestic reverse VAT, which sort of just blows people's heads up in different countries. They go, how do you work with something that's so complicated? And so you get used to that, I guess, after a while, the UK tax system.
Well, we have to complicate everything, don't we?
Exactly.
The poor tradesmen out there, struggling. Yeah. And I presume then the software application or digital tools within that are there just to make people's lives easier, to benefit people. Maybe making that transition from a sort of paper-based thing. What would you say, James, is the starting point for people getting involved in this kind of digital world?
Yeah, and I think we've got a pretty interesting backstory as to how we came about, which is, we were founded by, unfortunately, a plumber, so apologies for that. But he came
to we get on really.
Yeah, he says that electricians don't clean up, but that's the only bad thing he said. So he had a really interesting backstory where actually he started a plumbing business and unfortunately went bankrupt, struggling with cash flow, really struggled, went away, repaid all his debt. For some reason decided to try it again, which I think most of us would probably go, I'm not doing this is me done. Came back the second time, and this time he mentally burned out. In his head, he was like, well, I need to be more proficient, with my cash flow, because the last time I went bust. This time, I'll go at it a better way. Second time around, he was so on it with his paperwork. He just spent his life doing paperwork and he burnt out. So closed the business down, went away again, spent some time in Australia. Unlike most people, came back for the third time lucky, I guess, and thought, let's just give this another go. Fortunately, met a guy down the road who could make a bit of software and said, look, these are the problems I had. Help me to solve these problems. And he was really successful. He went on to his plumbing business, grew to 25 plumbers which is pretty decent by any standards. But when you think about Auckland, New Zealand, which is quite a small, condensed city, it's a pretty good achievement to have. The business still runs today. But off the back of it came this great bit of tool which can really help you run a business and be more profitable ultimately.
Right. And I presume that initial stage of it starting up was like it was limited to what it needed to do. Like say, he'd recognised the problems, but now it's grown into morphed into something huge, I would have thought. Over the years.
Exactly. And I think there's an interesting transition as you go through this. We see lots of people moving through different, almost like life cycles of starting to use apps. I think if you start a business now, for example, you probably walk into a bank and open a bank account. You probably do it on your phone. So, people are starting to use digital tools a lot more commonly in those things. And then you kind of progress through that almost in like a journey. So you use some kind of digital accounting tool like Xero or QuickBooks, which is going to start to make your life really easy. Your accountant's probably going to be a bit happy with you. And then like as the journey goes on, you can progress into sort of more advanced software as well.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, thinking about my time on the tools, it's I've been off the tools for a while now, but as I was coming off the tools, those things were starting to come in, by like using, like you say, things like QuickBooks, and so you weren't there endless bookkeeping or your receipts. Now you can simply take photocopies of them and they store them and everything like that. But I think to me, as an electrician, sometimes the technical side of it, where it's design software, or maybe something like a naked fast test, for instance, which you're aware of, anything that's going to make my life a little bit easier and stop me dropping the ball in those areas has got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the problems that a lot of people run into is they try and almost run into these situations. It's like, I need to use this tool and I need to go tomorrow and I'm going to start doing it. And it's like, if you were a regular, different type of business with, let's say, 10 employees, and you went to try and use a new tool, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. People have to get used to these things. You have to change perhaps processes. So we see lots of people trying to run when actually a little bit of a slower pace to go into it, take a bit of time to understand it and almost embed it in your life, generally has a really good outcome versus trying to go full steam ahead and potentially just get a bit frustrated with what you're doing.
That's quite refreshing, James, isn't it, as well? And because most people, if you feel like it's a hard sell on a piece of software, so it sounds like from your point of view, you'd rather people take a cautious approach, dip the toe in the water, and then you can develop that as the years go on. Is that the advice you'd give?
Exactly. And we kind of adapted our plans in the UK around that. So we've got a really entry level package because we started to see people were jumping in going, well, what are all these bells and whistles doing? It's like, look, don't worry about those. Go back to the basics, right? What are you doing today? What are the few processes you're doing that we can help you with? And then we'll worry about the rest that, in the future, because right now you can help within a small bit, but let's help you in the future to grow out in that.
Yeah, and especially I think there for tradesmen, if their productivity is out installing work, isn't it? That's that being out on the tools. So that back end stuff, if that can be managed almost not by itself, but through the systems that are in place, then I think that's can only be a good thing. I remember those endless nights when I worked for myself of, the drawings on a table, doing tenders for builders. That's so time consuming, where applications and digital tools can help you do that quite easily these days.
Yeah, and I think so. Dan, our founder, it's some interesting numbers when he came out. So he had about 25 staff towards the end. They were doing on average around about 6,000 projects a year with about 3,500 quotes going out. Now, if you think about sort of producing that number of quotes out the year sort of manually, it's a lot of work to do. But there's really lots of information in the background. So like off the back of that, he did about 7,500 invoices every year. But actually, there were about 15 to 20,000 site visits. So when you start to think about the management level and the amount of paperwork and all that paper trail is a huge amount of work. And I think off the back of that, he had something like 30,000 sort of invoices from his suppliers. So, the lad's going out and buying something from a supplier, come back with a bit of paper, and he was sitting manually rekeying it in his computer. And if you
double-handed work, isn't it, really?
Exactly. And if you go, well, there's a way to do this automatically. You don't have to sit and type them in. That saving alone is probably, equivalent to someone sitting in an office full time for you.
Yeah. I mean, that was almost my next bit. You can see from what you've just said, the time saving and the benefits of these digital applications are just, like you say, you don't even realise till you try them, does it? I mean, for me, I think, I'm sort of sat in the middle of being in that IT world, so I'm not quite old enough where I don't know it. But I think for some some tradesmen out there that have always been sort of paper based and don't want to make that transition? How do you guide them towards the digital world? Because you made a good point earlier. You try and open a bank account now, you probably don't get an option to walk in a branch because there isn't one on your high street. So your digital options are sometimes the only options. How do you feel you get people involved that perhaps are really resisting?
So I think the first thing you've got to have is some level of commitment. And now, if we speak to people all the time that come and look at our tool and go, great, I'm interested. And it's like, well, are you in a position to actually do something with this? They often go, I don't have any time to look at it this week. And it's like, well, at some point you'll have to make a sacrifice, right? You have to stop and go, I need half an hour to go, what am I going to do about this and how am I going to do it? Almost that going back to just slowing things down and going, let's just create a bit of time, because in the long run it's going to help me. And when you do that, you start to be in a position where you can actually see how these processes will sort of give you that time back. It sounds really cheesy because we always talk about sort of changing people's lives, and it is a bit cheesy on the front, but actually that's what we do, because we can give you hours back in your week. Not just us, but any digital tool is going to give you time back. And you see that throughout. Lots of people that sign up for our free trial of our software, they come in at some stupid hour in the morning. We see people between 10 and 2 a.m. logging on our website, and exactly. And stereotypically, maybe they've come back from the pub and they're doing their invoicing at the computer. But it's like,
it's a dangerous game, isn't it? Drunk invoicing.
Exactly. We don't want you to be doing that. We want you to just go out to the pub and enjoy your time. Don't come back and have to sit in front of your computer all night doing those things.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I mean, obviously the benefits, but like you say, there are some barriers, and I could think of perhaps, like you say, maybe the older tradesperson that might be resistant to that, but that it's making them bringing them on a journey with you. That's the sense I'm getting, bringing them on a journey.
Yeah, and I think there's ways around that. We were on site with a customer earlier this week actually, and they've got about 10 engineers out on the road. One of them, I think he's in his mid to late 60s and doesn't own a smartphone. So the rest of the company have adopted this digital tool, but he's still in the paper-based world, so he still fills out his timesheet in paper, but they just go and do it in the back office and process it for him. So there's ways around those kind of things, if you're in that situation.
Sorry, James. I was thinking from my time in education, when e-portfolios came online, so we, rather than going out and writing a big folder of someone's work that they did out on site and keeping a record of photos and literally written handwork, e-portfolios were such a time-saving thing for NVQ assessors. But as you said earlier, some of them were so clunky, they were almost harder to use sometimes. And they did have lots of bells and whistles on some of the more expensive ones, but you never use those parts of it. So I think having software that's intuitive and not clunky and able to use somebody's key, isn't it, when you're developing something like that?
And I think there's lots of great tools out there that people sort of don't see as well. So like if you have an iPhone, for example, when you go and type something into a keyboard, there's a little microphone button. Now it doesn't matter what app you're using. If you press that button and say the word, whatever you want to, let's say I'm doing a certificate, it's going to write it down in the keyboard for you. So there are ways of making these things so much easier to use that are just baked into everything we do every day. So lots of good tips to sort of learn out there.
I think you're right. I think technology is moving at such a pace, and we either move forward with it and adapt it, or we get left behind, don't we? Especially in a competitive world of tradesmen trying to win jobs. I think tools like yourself and other tools that are out there are a must, really, aren't they?
And I think lots of people view digital tools as a way to sort of help them do this back office function. And actually, one of the really interesting bits about it is how the perception a customer has of you when you start to use these tools really effectively. I've got a great example. My friend will kill me for this because he was a property surveyor and he told me not to buy the house because it has a flat roof. And he said, you'll need a flat roof when you move, roof redone when you move in there. I said, no, it'll be fine. Lo and behold, 6 months in, I needed a new roof. So
you knew best, James. You knew best.
So I went into this process of trying to find a roofer to come out, which is never enjoyable. Got sort of 5 people to come out and give a quote. And the first guy came out and he didn't have the right ladder on us. So the next person, I said, look, the office phoned me and said he's going to come around on Thursday. He'll be there at this time. And they used the tool. So I got an appointment confirmation through straight away. I said to the girl in the office, I said, look, just so you're aware, it's a 3-story property. A 2-story ladder is not going to reach you. She said, oh, don't worry. Yeah, I'll make a note in the system on that. So he'll bring a ladder with him. I said, great, fantastic. So Thursday comes around. I get a text message say the guy's on the way. Well, this is someone that's in sort of this industry. This is quite nice, refreshing to see. He arrived up the front I met him at my front door. The dog's barking in the background, and he goes, "Oh, I don't have a ladder."
No.
And I said, "Well, I did speak to your office about this." And he went, "Okay." And he got out his phone, loaded up the app, went into the job, and went, "Oh yeah, there is a note on here to say that I need a 3-story ladder." So even with the best bit of technology in place, they failed to actually sort of build it into their day-to-day processes and actually look at it.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting.
he had all this information, but he failed to use it. Now, from my perception, it was an interesting one because he'd come from about 45 minutes away. So driven 45 minutes, come to my house. I bent his ear for probably 15 minutes moaning about why I didn't have a ladder.
Yeah.
And then he went on to the next one. So he's probably wasted 2 hours of his day just on that failed quote, really. Then he came back a week later with the right ladder. So he had to do that whole thing again. And if you think, well, it's not too much work, but actually that's 4 hours of sort of billable work someone could be doing to some extent, which is a huge saving. So even with the best tools in place, there is a sort of a people and a process functionality that you've got to get working around it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's got to be used, hasn't it? Rather than just sat there, you know, if you don't use it, then that's a brilliant example, because you think not only from a point of view of wasting your time and you as a customer getting frustrated, you imagine if he's working direct for that company, that they're going to be not very happy with you didn't check the notes, because that's part of your job description to make sure you turn up ready to do what the customer asked.
And I think from a kind of sort of perception perspective, it's not great either. I've clearly told them something about it and they've just ignored it, so it's wasted a bit of my time, and they sort of slowly slipped down my list of companies that I'd potentially like to come and do my roof. They didn't do my roof in the end, so
maybe you did get your roof sorted, hopefully.
I have. That's a whole other story though, so
okay, we'll do another podcast. We'll do another podcast on that one.
We'll do a roofing podcast,
a roofing podcast only. That would be fantastic. So have you any other good examples, James, of where you've seen in different things, where the software, specifically your software, perhaps you've seen that transition from like someone that was perhaps a little bit naive with it that's gone on to benefit? You don't have to name them, but there must be loads of good stories. Yeah,
we were with actually one of our customers this week, filming a great video of sort of behind the scenes in their office. And it's a great company, sort of 10 people, and they were 100% paper-based before they joined us about 2 years ago now. And they've made a complete transition to this digital app. They've got a calendar which they can now instantly schedule people out whilst someone rings up and says, "Can you come and do this bit of reactive work?" Their office staff can see instantly where their guys are at, go, "Great, you need to now go on to this job, I'd like you to go there," and reschedule their day. And even down to sort of those horrible back office functions. So we integrate with lots of electrical wholesalers, and we can basically take your invoices straight from the wholesaler and put it into the system and allow you to back cost it and do those things out. So they've saved so much time, and on that aspect, they can now focus their attention elsewhere. So, they're starting to do a lot of solar work for sort of farms and commercial buildings. And by freeing up that sort of general admin time, it allows them to be a bit more forward thinking and go, great, where do we put our time now in things that are going to help the business to thrive?
So they can plan more efficiently. That's another great example. And what struck me then is what you just said about the wholesaler invoice feeding straight in, because that was going to be one of my questions about, if we've got this piece of software, how does it integrate with others, like you say, what the accountant's using, something like QuickBooks or wholesalers invoice feeding in. I mean, it's got capabilities to do that, I take it then. Not in all circumstances, I would have thought, but.
No, but the majority. So that's kind of one of the things we really believe in is our tool is there to help you grow your business. And the really way we do that is by talking a bit about profit. And it's generally a scary word when you talk to electricians and tradespeople. I do a lot of talks at the ELEX shows, and you ask someone what profit margin they're making on their jobs, and they generally just stare blankly at you and go, "What do you mean? Like, I make money." And you're like, "Do you?" And so throughout our software, we expose actually how much profit you're going to make on a job. So you go and do a quote, and we'll go, "Hey, we know how much you pay your guys out on the tools. We know how much you're buying these things for. At this markup and this day rate, you're going to make X% profit." Or in the case of some customers, when they're on board with us, they input all their details and go, "It says I'm not going to make any money on this job." You go, "Well, that's because you're not."
Yeah.
And then they have a sudden rude awakening where they go, "Oh, I need to rethink this." So we expose those things, but the really important thing is that back costing. So when they go out and do the job, let's say they're installing a load of power sockets around the room, and the customers drag them and said, "Oh, whilst you're here, would you mind just doing this for me?" And they go and put a new light switch in somewhere and run a load of cable, etc. Now, what we typically see is most companies fail to see that. So they'll charging the customer for the time they're out there, but they might have thrown something in from the back of the van to do the job, a bit of kit. Now that's cost the business some money to put in there. That cost has to be carried on to the end customer, and we see that more often than not. People don't follow those costs through. So we take wholesaler invoices. We basically get them automatically sent from anyone from the likes of CEF, Rexel, ES Electrical. The list is endless. It comes straight into Fergus, and we try and match it automatically to the job you've been on. So we look at the details and go, oh, hey, we think this was for Joe Bloggs down the road. And then you can go, well, actually, there were 10 things on that invoice, but I only quoted them for 5. So the guys put a load of stuff in and I don't know about it. So you can make sure you're really passing those costs on. You get a huge time saving from actually automatically putting the invoices in. We do some fancy stuff, so it all goes into your accounting package as well. But you're also making sure you're passing the costs on to the customer, which is where you get that profit margin from.
Wow, I am impressed. That sounds really good. I wish there was something like that back in my day, because I missed all those things. People going, oh, can you do this extra? Sometimes I don't think I even charge for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's one of the common problems, I think. But, by using something which allows you on the fly whilst you're out on the site to go, actually, I need to do X, Y, Z instead. You can even go so far as to get the customer to sign on their phone and go, yeah, I accept these costs and I'm happy with the work. It's going to make life so much easier for you.
And what I love about what you just described as well, James, is that it's highlighting where you're not making any money, because that must, like, you can just go along during the year just churning out jobs thinking you're doing great, just charging a day rate. But like you've quite rightly, your day rate and your material, your day rate is you working and those hours you're putting in working. That's not profit. And I think tradesmen get confused. But if you can see it in an application, you're like, actually that's in black and white. You might miss that in paper form, or even miss it if you're not doing paperwork. That's fantastic.
And it's real time as well, so you can see it on a day-to-day basis. We've got a great dashboard which is all color coded, and everything's like, hey, green is great, orange is, oh, maybe I should have a look at it, and red is like, hang on a minute, this guy's not paid an invoice for 30 days, so jump in and have a look at it. Whereas if you're on a paper-based system, typically you're going to do your receipts at the end of the month, maybe at the end of the quarter, depending on how lazy you are. And then at the end of the year, you go and do your tax return. And that's typically the point people find out about these things. So by moving to digital tools, like Xero or QuickBooks, and then something like Fergus, you kind of have that information real time, right? Where is my business today? And that allows you to make better decisions.
What's happening now? Yeah, that's brilliant. So James, that's been really informative. And if people want to know more about your particular software, where do they head over? The website, I take it, is a good place to go.
Yeah, exactly. So fergus.com is the website. Pop on there. We've got a 14-day free trial, which you can sign up to with no credit card, no commitment. One of the team, is on hand to help people. We understand that these tools are, not always as straightforward to adopt. So we're there to help you in that process. Make sure you understand what it can do, what processes you can put in place, and ultimately get it set up for success with the software. Yeah,
and like you said earlier, I take it then you've got sort of a tier of packages that people can have like you say, the trial, have a look. I want to dip my toe in the water and then move through as their business grows. You'll go with them.
Exactly, and with zero commitment as well. So it's rolling based contracts. You can dip your toe in and go, great, get everyone in. We're not going to tie you down to any extensive contracts. We believe in the product, and we believe when you use it, you'll be really happy with it, and you'll stay with us for years and be great customers. So we don't want to hold you, your feet to the fire and say you're not leaving. So it's a rolling 30-day contract.
Yeah, it's confident in your product, isn't it? Which is great to hear. James, that's been really useful. I've really enjoyed listening to that, and hopefully our listeners as well. So thanks for your time today. Absolutely been awesome, and I'll see you soon for some shuffleboard, hopefully this year.
Yeah, no problem, Stephen. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. So thanks for listening to another What's Current Napier podcast, and hope you join us on the next one. Bye for now.